No. Excellent. We'll give it a minute before we actually just start having the conversation, because I do just want to let people kind of get on board a little bit more. So, and then I want to also make sure that everything is actually working out there. And yeah, actually, I see us live on my phone right now, which is good. We're getting some comments from everybody. Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait a couple minutes before we get started. So thank you all for joining so far.
And you know my video is going to drop.
Yep. Just be ready. Brad James has had some technical difficulties already, so we'll put that out there. We get about 10 minutes of him, and then he disappears for a little bit, and then he comes back. But his voice is always there just with us, you know?
With us in spirit.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, we got one viewer. No, I'm just kidding.
It's me on my phone.
Jamin, ask really good questions, all right?
Yeah.
I'll just keep making up names for the questions that are coming in, yeah.
Cool. I'm on it.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Thanks for the comments. Everybody can hear us fine. If somebody can just drop in the comments, let us know if you got good audio. That would be great. From everything on my end, it looks like there is good audio. I love seeing the delay of the video that's going out on my second screen over here. So if something happens here, I can just look over there and get to rewatch it again. It's exciting.
Oh, nice.
Seeing your whole world in reverse too is always strange.
Yeah.
I think we'll just wait like a minute or two, and then we'll get the show started, you know? Which
Sounds
the show
good.
started is pretty much going to be what we're doing right now anyway. So not too big a deal there. Excellent. Sounds good. Glad to hear it.
Perfect.
Everybody is responding wonderfully. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. That's good to go. And we'll have a vote at the end in the comments for best background. I mean, it's obvious who wins. And we will not have the worst background vote because that's just mean. And we also already know who wins that one.
Oh, too funny.
You can tell that we're good friends already because I'm just immediately picking on Brad.
Bashing each other.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
it's not a good show unless there's some good bashing going on there.
Exactly.
All right, well, listen, we have a good number of viewers already, and it's a couple minutes after 3:30, so I'd say let's get started. Welcome everyone to Wildlife Conversations. Oh wait, I said it wrong. Welcome everyone to Wild Conversations. See, I'll cut it right there. And in the recorded version, the clean version is all that's going to go out.
Yeah, none of this
Although I
is
just
live
said all
at all,
that,
too,
so I need to say it one more time. Welcome everyone to Wild Conversations. I'm here with Emily, Brad, Jamin, and Jess. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited for this. We don't know exactly how it's going to go. We have an idea. We have made some planning here, but basically we're just here to have a conversation with you guys. We're going to have a conversation amongst ourselves, basically, that you guys get to listen in on, ask some questions, give us some comments and some feedback and that sort of thing. This idea came from the idea that all photographers tend to love to get together with their friends and talk shop, you know? I'm sure you can relate to that, and we all have done that amongst ourselves in the past, and we thought, what a great idea to just kind of share that with the world and kind of get all those different ideas out there, have those conversations, and see what everybody else thinks about it. So with that, we're just going to get started by introducing ourselves. We're going to go around the room here with everybody and let them know where you're coming from. We'll get to Brad last because he just lost his webcam again, to be expected, which is fine. So let's start with Jamin. Where are you from? How long have you been shooting, Jamin?
Yeah. Well, hi. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And yeah, I live in Alaska, so way up north. Yeah, I've been shooting since, I think seriously, since like 2016. So it's been 4 years now.
Is that all?
And yeah, that's it.
I thought you've been shooting longer.
Amazing. No, yeah, I picked up, I got my first DSLR back in 2016. So it's been an adventure since then. And my background, I've been an artist since I can remember, you know, since I was a kid doing various art stuff. And
Nice.
I'm a graphic designer by trade. So that's what I do professionally.
Thanks for our awesome logo, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, I guess, you know, composition and all that stuff is just kind of in my blood. And When I picked up photography, I started, I guess, channeling all my art into my photography, and
Yeah, that makes sense.
so, yeah, it's been
Nice.
fun. Glad to be here.
Excellent. All right, perfect. While we have Brad's camera right now, Brad,
Yeah,
where are you
good
from? How long
idea.
have you been shooting, man? Let's take
I'll
advantage
talk really,
of
really fast.
it.
Yeah, I'm Brad James from small town Conception Bay South in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. Been shooting for 10 years, probably serious in the past, say, 5 or 6 years with wildlife. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Excellent, man. Nice. Sounds good. Thank you. All right, Emily, you're up.
Hey guys, I'm in Hilton Head, South Carolina. I've been shooting birds for about 2 years and about 1 year, like creatively and artistically, I guess.
Nice. Perfect. Yeah.
Impressive.
Were you said shooting birds for 1 or 2 years. Were you photographing stuff before that?
Just like nature, sunsets,
Okay.
sunrises, trees.
Yeah. Like but it was all nature to start out with as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never been interested in like people or shooting people.
No, I think that's across the board for every wildlife photographer anyway. That's the thing I hear the most people say, I just, people, whatever.
Yeah, not into
No, I know what
people.
you mean. Yeah, so you haven't done any of that other kind of photography. Have you since started doing any kind of other photography, or is it still all just the nature stuff?
No, just nature and just
Cool.
birds, really. Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. All right, awesome. And then Jess, we'll wrap it up with you.
Yeah, so my name's Jess Findlay. I live in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada, just the suburbs of Vancouver. And I guess I started photographing wildlife probably around 2010, something like that, 2009,
Nice.
2010. So just at the tail end of high school. And yeah, I've been pretty focused on kind of not just birds specifically, but started with that. And then I've just kind of branched out from there, doing a lot of landscape stuff and a lot of mammals. And yeah, really anything that is around my area in the natural world. And then I spend a reasonable portion of the year down in the tropics, leading workshops and tours down there. So spend a lot of time in the tropical rainforest, as well as the temperate rainforest here where I live. So
Nice. Awesome. All right. And then I'll wrap it up. It's Ray Hennessy here. I have been photographing wildlife for, gosh, how long has it been now? I think I started in 2006, kind of getting into birds and wildlife. And then kind of seriously, I would say around 2010, 2012 is when I kind of felt like I finally started knowing what I was doing, like 5-6 years in. Before that, I was photographing, working for other photography studios, actually. So I've been making a living as a photographer since 1999. So over 20 years now, which is pretty cool. It's kind of, it's neat to be able to say that. I think it's kind of a neat thing to be able to make a living in photography in one way, shape, or form for that long, because it's not easy, but it is fun. And this is my first full year of doing wildlife photography full time, because before that I was a wedding photographer and ran a wedding photography business with my now ex-wife. We had that for 10 years and ran that. So that was a lot of fun. So I want to start, I just want to kind of, I want to bounce around the room to you guys with some questions here, because it came up with just what we introduced ourselves with. Who here has photographed other stuff outside of nature? So obviously I've done the portrait stuff. I work for an architect photographer. I've done a lot of the variety of wildlife stuff, wildlife, landscape, star scenes, like night stuff, that kind of stuff. But, I've done very little bit of street photography and, obviously a lot of people as well. Has anybody else done anything outside of just like nature related stuff in their photography?
Done
yeah,
a little bit of
Brad.
people.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
No, I've done pretty much almost everything. And actually my wife, she does photography as well. So I kind of help her out and assist her with newborns, family shoots, kids. Yeah. I've done landscape on my own. Probably the only thing that I really haven't done a lot of is night shooting.
Okay.
So yeah, pretty much dabbled in almost everything.
Nice.
Brad
Jess,
has super strong landscape work for sure. Like seeing your coastal stuff, Brad, I remember when you were kind of first, or at least posting some of that stuff and seeing that across your social media, it was cool because there's not a ton of landscape photography, at least that I see, coming from that part of the world. So
No, there's not a lot of big. I mean, there's photographers here for sure, but just not a lot of photographers. You don't see a lot of that content coming out, right?
You would
So,
think,
yeah,
because it's a
thanks.
gorgeous area.
It is, yeah. We have just about everything. You know what I mean? I've traveled all over the world, and like we have areas where we have beaches that look like you swear you're in Florida, and then you go to the West Coast, and we have decent sized mountains there, and we have big coastland, and we have boreal forests, and so this is a nice mix, right? So yeah, there's a lot to explore here for sure.
Jamin, I want to get to you next, but real quick in the comments, Emily, some people are mentioning you photograph dogs as well. So.
Oh, my family. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Jamin, how about you? Anything else outside of the nature stuff?
I've dabbled in people photography a little bit, but
and then quickly ran away.
Yeah, so a little bit. I tried with some landscape stuff. Always, I'm so critical of my landscapes though. Like I'll take photos and take the time and do stuff, and then like I get into the Lightroom and I hate them.
Oh, really?
So that happens a lot. So I'm just gonna keep pushing at it, and maybe eventually I'll get some cool stuff. So
yeah, sounds good. Real quick before we kind of talk, so the rest of the show we're gonna do a little bit of a recap of some of our favorite experiences and moments photographically this past year. And so before that, though, I just want to kind of hit this topic a little bit more because I think there's something there. Even with the other nature stuff. So let's focus on just wildlife photography for now, since that's what most of us do, a good portion of. How much of those other areas of photography do you think influence your wildlife photography? Because for me, I can say, like, I can pinpoint the biggest thing for me was my use of lighting and composition totally came from my portrait background. Like that's where I learned it and honed it, and I was able to kind of just pull those pieces of that over into my wildlife photography. And I think at least when I first started getting really into wildlife photography, that kind of helped boost my my progress a little quicker. That learning curve, it kind of helped that grow a little bit faster because I had that foundation from that other genre of photography. Does anybody else have anything that kind of, either whether it be from landscape or anything like that, macro, that kind of pulls in to just the wildlife photography and maybe helped out there?
I don't know if I could speak to any one example particularly, but I think like when I first started photography, I was in a camera club, and there was a whole variety of different genres of photography there. And but yeah, it's crazy how when you look back, you think like, when did I first pick up that skill? If it's, whatever it is, like using flash or shooting at twilight or doing long exposure stuff or whatever the case is. But oftentimes when I look back at when I would have first used that, it might not have even been in sort of the wildlife world.
Yeah.
So I think that's powerful, even just if you're not super passionate about it, just going and like, even if you're not trying to be the world's best astrophotographer, like go out and try to do some star shots. Or if you're not into street photography, just go out and try it one day, and you never know what that will kind of lead to in terms of just some other skills to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, I agree. Brad, looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah. and yeah, because I found too, like when I was doing landscape photography, like blending different exposures, and like it forced me to almost learn more about Photoshop and the tools that were capable or what you could use within Photoshop. Kind of transferred over a little bit more into my wildlife because I didn't edit much of them. I'm not saying I'm replacing backgrounds or nothing like that, but just being able to fine tune or make adjustments quicker to my wildlife images, was knowledge I picked up from doing landscape photography.
Definitely.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything from either you guys?
I guess for me, before I started shooting birds, I would, shoot sunrise and sunsets. And so those were always the times that I enjoyed, like being outside and trying to take pictures anyway. So like before I realized what good light is and anything, it kind of tended to shoot during those times. So yeah,
that's great. It kind of just, it primed you to be out at that good time anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Nice. Jamin?
I started out as a birder. I got really interested in birds, and like sometime in 2015, like I heard a Swainson's thrush in the forest one night when I was camping with my family, and my son was like 1 year old, and like I heard this like just amazing song, because they have like the most beautiful ethereal song, and it was just enchanting, so that really got me into birds. And then I was added to this Facebook group called Birds of Alaska, and like I started seeing like all these really beautiful pictures. I was like, oh man, I want to do that. The artist in me is like, oh, I want to do that. So I didn't really have much experience. I took some photography courses in college, but I wasn't really that interested in it at that point. So I think my biggest influences coming into photography is just probably, like I mentioned before, like my graphic design history and profession in that, in art. So
yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, nice.
Do you find that gives you a leg up with the processing too, having known?
Oh yeah,
a lot
that
of these
definitely gave
softwares and
me.
stuff?
Yeah, that definitely gave me a leg up on the processing. Once I had that, I had to learn Lightroom, but that wasn't really hard.
Yeah,
It was just a little bit different, but like Photoshop and stuff, I knew pretty well. So yeah, that was nice to be able to kind of have that in the bag already.
Yeah, dude, I can completely agree with that, because that was the one thing, my first job was just doing Photoshop for 40 hours a week for, I think I was doing it for probably 5-6 years of just Photoshop every day, all day. And that was before I even started shooting at all. I was just on the computer. I didn't even have a camera, actually. All I wanted to do initially was just the computer side of stuff. And so then once I started getting into that, it was like the editing side was just, a piece of cake. And so I did come into it a little backwards, but I think it was kind of helpful in that regard, but I don't think that's kind of a normal process for most people, is to just only want to be behind the computer and not the camera. But that was weirdly how I started. So, yeah. All right. Who wants to kick it off? Who wants to start up and tell us some of the highlights from this past year? Anybody can go for it.
Emilie, go for it.
Yeah,
Anybody
they know
can
I'm like the
assign
most
anybody
anxious.
else.
Yeah, okay.
All right, Emily, go ahead. You can start sharing your screen. We'll make sure that comes through.
Okay. Well, I'll just
And
start
I am
talking
seeing
before
some
I
of the
realize.
comments with questions. I have some of that. I'm going to kind of mark them down and get back to them when is a good time. So don't think that I'm ignoring your questions and comments, people. Thank you.
So since this is kind of like my first year of like wildlife photography, pretty much all of the moments that I had were kind of like exciting. And
Nice.
so I feel like throughout the year, like all of the species that I got to see for the first time, like seeing spoonbills for the first time. I'm going to share this real quick.
Yep. Yeah, I was just going to say we don't have your screen yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to,
Okay.
get my life together over here.
Yep. All good. Take your time. There we go. We got it.
Oh,
Nice.
sweet.
So this was one of definitely, it was in the spring. My mom and I went to Florida, and our goal was to see spoonbills and a reddish egret, but
check.
So yeah, check. We did see both, but being able to see so many and have it like on this cool tree and stuff, that was definitely one of the highlights.
Had you seen spoonbills before that?
No.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah, so
the first time you see them is just like insane, right?
Yeah, we did this road trip to Florida, like specifically just to see spoonbills and different other birds. I mean, Florida has the best birds.
It's like cheating down there.
It really, really is.
Oh, crazy.
This one was from this summer.
Nice.
Reddish egret, and I think that was another road trip with my mom.
Was this sunrise or sunset? Let's leave that up for a sec.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Yeah. That's okay.
That is sunset. So it's,
sunset.
Yeah, it was kind of. It wasn't like the. It was in this. I don't know what it's called. Like not the ocean, but it was like a little.
Like a bay.
Pool, like a tide pool.
Yeah.
Before, before the ocean, kind of, because the tide's changing and everything. So I couldn't get it where like the sun was dropping in the behind the water, but I was still happy to get some of these backlit shots like this one. And
oh yeah, totally.
Was it shaking off and then jumping up, kind of like little shorebirds will do?
They're super weird. I mean, they do different things when they hunt, but yeah, like he was just jumping straight up and then wow. And then kind of jumping around after as well.
So that was more of like its feeding process, right? It was in the middle of feeding.
Yeah,
totally.
They just there was a couple of them. There was 2 of them actually, and they they just kind of they jump up, they jump around, and they just they're kind of very interesting to watch as they
Yeah, they sure are.
As they hunt, they kind of dance around.
I think they're one of the most fun waders to watch feed. It's them and snowy egrets do the same thing where they're just like constantly running and chasing stuff. Yeah. Have all of you guys seen? Have any of you guys seen those species like reddish egrets, snowy egrets?
Yeah, definitely not around this part of the world, but
I know that.
yeah, a little further south for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a trip down to Florida a couple years ago, and it was awesome. It was just mind blowing because there was so much, so many birds. I went to the Wakatahatchee wetlands.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It was phenomenal.
And they're like right there in your face.
Yeah.
Like back up, birds.
I wish they had actually opened that park earlier. Because they don't open it until like 7 or something, I think. But like by that time, the light's starting to get harsh already.
Right.
Yeah, you usually got to do like a sunset thing there to get the best light, because they'll let it stay open just past sunset, I think. And so you can get that like really good evening light, And it's not like, to me, it's not like an exotic wildlife experience because you're on a boardwalk with a bunch of other people and stuff like that. But amazing opportunities, it's just incredible stuff. The birds are right there. The one nice thing is you get really good behavior because the birds don't give a crap about people at all. Obviously, they're just so used to having people go through there. So that's one of the good trade-offs I like.
Yeah, and if you're looking for places to go in Florida, Fort DeSoto is like a great place to go because the birds are just like all over, and there's so many different types, and But a couple
one
other
of the comments. One of the comments here is spoonbills. Don't you mean flamingos? And they're putting as a joke. So yes, Bill, we know. A lot of people do mistake them for flamingos up front. So yeah, nice.
Another exciting thing for me was to see burrowing owls for the first time.
Very good.
Yeah, and this was at sunset time, and it's so weird in Cape Coral where these guys hang out, and they're just like pretty much in their yards and stuff. So this was in a residential neighborhood, but it was like kind of an abandoned type of field, like an empty lot, I guess, where they have area protected set up for the owls. But yeah, they were just so interesting to kind of see, first of all, because they're so small, and like I had never seen one before, and it's just kind of like a surreal experience when you see them for the first time and get to kind of see how they interact with each other and head tilts and everything. They're just like super cute. And
what time of year did you go see them?
That was in summer, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so some of the young were like fledged at that point and just out and about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Show one more of them.
Yeah, they're hilariously small. Like they're way smaller than you anticipate too, at least for me.
Yeah.
Like I knew they were going to be small and on the ground, but I just wasn't expecting them to be that small,
So this one was from a baseball field. I don't know if you guys can you see it?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. You can see it. Yeah.
And
the light is really, really cool.
Yeah, so that was from the stadium, so and if you actually kind of see, like you can kind of see the...
I was going to say,
so this was
like
at night?
Interesting catch light.
Yeah, so this was after sunset, and
that's
the
crazy.
stadium was lit up with these huge lights. So yeah, and it was amazing. I was like, I could just stay here shooting for, hours, but, I was with my mom, and I don't think she would have... Not that she doesn't like burrowing owls or enjoy the experience, but yeah, she gets tired after a while. Probably.
Oh, that's always the trade-off. Whenever you're traveling with somebody that's non-photographer, they think like, oh, you're just going to take the shot and then move on, right? And you're like, oh
right.
No, I want to sit here for hours.
Yeah, like I could just sit here and it's kind of a cool experience. Like he's literally hanging out right outside of a baseball field, and like you can hear, I have some video of him where, you can hear the game going on in the background and cheering and the baseball hits and everything. Like so wild that, this animal is just kind of thriving amongst all of that.
That's it tells the story of what they have to do to survive and what they have done to survive in that area,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people do have this conception that, all the photos that you take, obviously we take them through a 600 millimeter lens, this narrow window, but if you were to expand out, it'd be just nothing but wilderness. But oftentimes it's just, like a porch and a railing here, like a feeder out of frame, or just things that you don't expect, but that's bizarre.
That would be
And then-
interesting to do a whole series. I know Caleb, I forget his last name, from Florida, has done a little series on his Instagram stories where he shares like the photo and then like he's got a phone snap of like what the scene looked like, you know? And I think
That's
that
a
would
cool
be like
idea.
a neat project to have, you know, kind of put together as like maybe a presentation as a gallery or something like that of the shot, what it looks like, and then what's actually behind it, you know? Oh, man.
So I
dreamy.
don't know if I'm talking too long here, just like
No,
stop
no,
me
you're
at
good.
any point.
Yeah.
But one major thing that I think really kind of changed for me was this summer that I decided to venture into the marsh. So I live on the marsh, but the marsh by my house is too deep to like go into, and it would just be impossible for photograph there. But there's this marsh that's like 2 minutes away from my house, and it's just a different
Poor
setup.
you. Got to go so far.
Yeah.
I
Really.
know, right? No, I was literally walking my dog one day, and I was like, I wonder, is this walkable? Like, because you know how marsh, the mud kind of, you sink in it, and it can be a dangerous situation. Not good if you're having all this expensive camera equipment, but the way that this one is, it's just the tide doesn't go as high and the water levels. So it's more of that like firm packed marsh. And so I was just like, I mean, it's literally behind people's houses. So I kind of, I had my parents send out an email to our neighbors, like, our daughter's gonna go into the marsh. Like, she's not crazy.
If you see a woman stuck up to her neck in the marsh,
Help
maybe.
her out.
Yeah, just to like kind of give people a heads up. But yeah,
that's funny.
I mean, it totally changes the experience, of course, because I had already started, you know, getting low with the birds at the beach and, you know, getting that low perspective. But otherwise, like with the wading birds, I was just shooting them from my dock. And so like shooting birds from a dock, standing on a dock, you know, chilling, versus like in the marsh and having them being able to watch their, you know, feeding and everything, and just have the different colors and all that.
And they probably come closer too when you're down low and not kind of standing up over them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I've had crazy opportunities where they're just like in your face.
I've seen some of your videos. Yeah.
Yeah, like they just walk right. I mean, I try to respect their space and you know, let them do their like natural behaviors. But yeah, the more that
Are tricolored's the kind of main one around there?
We in the marsh that I shoot at, we get tricolored herons, snowy egrets, little blue herons, great blue herons, wood storks. I had like this group of wood storks for a while. Least sandpiper. There's tons of birds. I mean, there's a bunch, but nice. So it's just being able to, you know, without being in a blind and just being out there and kind of like being in their, you know, environment and just kind of like watching them. Even like sometimes I'm just there watching them, you know, fishing or, you know, dancing around and
just
it's
hanging
like,
with them.
like getting to appreciate them from that kind of so close and just like it's like I love it.
Sure. And when they don't move and then they come to you, like you're not invading their space at that point, you know, like if they come to you and you're not moving, they either don't know you're there or they do and they're accepting of it. So nothing wrong with that at all. Real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to mention the commenters. Thank you. It was Caleb Hoover. That was the name I was trying to remember on Instagram, who's done some of those stories. So just wanted to mention that.
But I mean, I could go on and on, so you should probably let somebody else start talking
right, sounds
about.
Good. No, so the main highlight of the year was just kind of getting out and exploring that marsh for the first time and really kind of diving into.
I think because it opens up like just all of the opportunities. You know, there's endless opportunities, and like every day, if I go in there every day, I could get a different picture. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, so just like kind of recognizing that potential that I have like 2 minutes away, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and
pretty awesome.
It's a great example of, you know, I mean, obviously you live in a really convenient area for that, but I think everybody has some area like that around them, you know? I live in a very urban area. It's like fully developed around here, but there's just, you know, if I walk out the front door, there's a small pocket of forest over there. And then there's like a little drainage pond, basically. Like it's a glorified drainage pond that's surrounded by condos and everything. And every year for 10 years, I have hooded mergansers that show up there every winter. So like, I don't have to travel to, you know, really far distant places to get these amazing opportunities, even though sometimes I want to, but just kind of paying attention to that backyard stuff can be fun. And then one other thing I want to mention about the marsh before we move on to the next person, take a note about the grass height. See if this holds true for your area. In my area, as soon as the grass gets taller, the mud under it is way softer. If it's really short grass, then it's like really firm and I can just walk on it. So that's what I've noticed. Like I can kind of navigate the marsh just by following the shorter grass, because as soon as I go anywhere near the taller grass, I've been like waist deep in mud, you know? Yeah. You're just like swimming out of it. It's crazy. But it's interesting how that kind of works in my area. So I'd be curious to know if it was the same down by you.
Yeah.
Who wants to jump in next? Share some highlights. Anybody?
I'll jump in.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
Go for it, Jamin.
Cool. Well, I'll say something I shared on my, I think it was Facebook a couple of weeks ago, is just I've been really playing around with portrait orientation this year.
Yeah.
And intentionally just turning my camera up and, you know, trying some different compositions. So I've gotten some really cool results with that this year. So I'll share a few of those.
Nice.
One of the highlights, of course, having Ray come visit. That was
yeah.
fun.
It's a highlight for me.
Yeah, we had a bunch of, and we just had a blast. So
bears. Right, while you're sharing that real quick, I'm just going to jump back to a question. Somebody asked, don't you worry about gators down there? And you're in a salt marsh, so I don't think you have to worry about gators in that area, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then I think that's pretty much it for that. So, all right, take it away, Jamin.
Cool. All right. Well, there's some recent stuff and
that's outstanding
examples of you know, some of the portrait orientation stuff that I've done. So the great gray owl from recent. Light was dying on us pretty quick. Sorry, I'm trying to move this around so I can like get the controls, but so
that's okay. Yeah, take your time, man. You got it.
Let's see. Squirrel. This young eagle was sitting on the beach.
I was just gonna say, is that like driftwood?
Yeah.
Nice.
And he was just sitting there, just without a care in the world. So it was pretty cool.
I've never seen it when the animal so brown like that.
Yeah. Oh man, and the light was so cool too. The light added to it. So boreal owl.
Oh, this boreal, man.
Yeah.
Jess.
So good.
Saw this guy not long ago. So it's really great when the critters give you the opportunity to play with stuff and just kind of hang out there.
That
the porcupine is insane.
It's so good. Yeah.
Look at this. Yeah. Denali National Park. This monster was just standing on the side of the road. So just super cool.
Is this this was just like, did you just shoot out of the car or hop out and get the shot, or how'd that go down?
This is on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. They
actually
roads are very
different than mine.
Yeah, they make you stay on the road during the rut. So you're not allowed to wander off the road. The park rangers are pretty adamant about staying on the road, and you know. Yeah. This little guy
so just good.
Hanging out on the side of a road. I found him. So cute.
Is that a younger one?
Yeah.
So does anybody know? Do they have like the strong quills when they're young? Because this one looks just like soft and furry.
Yeah, he didn't have a lot of quills.
Yeah.
Okay.
He actually didn't. So I didn't know
if like a couple like behind his eye or.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah, it does look like that.
Ray recognizes that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, the most brutal hike of my life, hands down.
It was.
If you guys haven't watched that vlog of Ray's, that's definitely worth a watch. Just to plug that, it's really, really cool just to see. Just I don't know. It doesn't ever seem canned and like, you know, you're filming it after the fact. It's just like you're out there, you're seeing what you're seeing, and I recognize a lot of. I'm not sure if these are from the same shoots, but I recognize some of these, like that spruce grouse and that.
Yeah.
Really cool.
So,
yeah, it was an amazing time, man.
Yeah.
Jamin, if you don't mind me asking, did you find shooting in this orientation more challenging when it came to compositions? Did you find it limited you with what kind of compositions you could come up with?
It was fun because it opened the door to different compositions. You know, like it forced me to think differently, and that's what I liked about it. But there was some cases where it didn't work for me. Like I'll take this one for an example: it's Trumpeter Swan. And I actually missed a bunch of the flaps here because the wings cut off like right here and right here, you know. So I had to pick the ones where he's kind of tucked in a little bit more, which actually worked out. I really liked how this looked, but there was some other ones, you know, where I cut off the wingtips because I was too close to him. So you know, but
go ahead.
Yeah, there's always going to be, you know, there's limitations no matter what. So I guess
you hang on that shot for a second? So like to me though, like the next shot in the sequence is to me the progression that would make sense on a vertical composition of this, because like this to me feels like it should probably be more horizontal because there's like not enough of that foreground to make it like real in your face foreground, you know, whereas the next shot you had of just a portrait of one, that one, like this one to me fits so much better with the vertical because there's so much more of that foreground there, and it just looks more purposeful and it looks more deliberate, and then the bird's head is like angled so he's looking down into the frame, so like all those things to me just make more sense for that vertical composition than the previous one.
Sometimes like this one was the case where I was already vertical when he started.
You're taking a shot. Totally.
Yeah, I took the shot, you know.
And it's not bad. I'm not trying to like trash that photo, but you know, I just saw that other thumbnail and I was just like, oh yeah.
Trash
my mute Ray here.
Yeah.
But you know, some of this is early on in the year. This is back in spring when I first started playing around with it, and just got some cool swan, you know, cool swan stuff. So
nice.
Yeah,
that one's really
but it's
nice
all.
too.
If anybody wants to check it out on Flickr, there's, you know, I've got a bunch of them here.
Are there any that stand out to you as like this is the one that really just, you know, worked so well with a vertical composition compared to?
Let me see.
I mean, there's a lot of good ones that stand out to me.
Yeah, this one does.
That's a good one. Yeah,
I really like this one.
Yeah, that's real sweet, man. And again,
it's a good example of a shot that if its head was level, it probably wouldn't have worked at as a vertical, but just that little 45 degree.
Yeah,
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. It's amazing how that works.
Here's one. Here's actually a recent one I wanted to share. Cool. So I was on a trail recently and saw this little guy down below, and then moved to get in. You know, He actually stayed put for a while, moving around and whatnot, and then disappeared all of a sudden when I looked away. And didn't see him running anywhere. So I was like, where'd he go, man? He's just like Houdini'd, you know? And so I got a different position and went around and discovered actually there was a den in the rocks. So that's where he went to. So I'd waited for him, and sure enough, he came right out. And so I nailed this portrait of him just kind of popping out there. So
how long do you have to wait?
Oh man, like less than 5 minutes.
Oh, nice. That's always sweet.
Yeah. Super curious. I was like,
how long would you have waited?
Probably a good while, but here's another one that particularly works well.
Yeah.
Really well in that orientation, that seal coming up.
I love the double chins.
Where's that one taken?
This was down in Homer.
Okay.
So I spent, I think it was back in November, I spent like 3 days. I went down there and just needed change of scenery and, you know, change of wildlife and whatnot. And so
different than Anchorage area too, hey?
Yeah, I live just north of Anchorage. So this was like a 6-hour drive north or south. And yeah, totally worth it though. It was fun. So
dude, it's funny, right? You look at the map of the entire state, and from where you are to there, it's just like this tiny little bit, right? And then you're like, you know, it's a 6-hour drive. Like it's the equivalent of me going like 3 states over, you know, from my area. Yeah. So it just completely can change the habitat, you know. So the scale up there just is insane.
Yeah, everything's huge. But yeah. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff there, but
very nice.
Yeah, we'll let somebody else.
Yeah, really nice stuff.
Thanks.
Brad, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. So I went a little different. I picked basically one. I've got one other image to show, but I basically picked one highlight moment or encounter. So I'll see if I can kind of paint the picture for everyone.
Nice.
So probably one of my favorite spots to photograph is about 2-hour drive from here. It's called Terrenceville. Small community. It's a valley. There's an inlet of water that kind of runs in through. And before you get there is just basically open, barren country. And then those are gone. Give me a sec.
Those are all amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah, sneak peek. So basically, like, I've had some of my most amazing encounters in this area. But what I love the most is, like, I get to hang around. This is where my wife is from. And hanging around my father-in-law, he kind of always tells me old stories about when he was growing up and his father, you know, they would hunt and they would have to use the land to kind of survive. And, you know, tell me about herds of caribou that used to roam. Like, it almost looked like the hills were moving. And
Wow.
one thing he always told me about was willow, ptarmigan, or we call them partridges sometimes. How they used to be on almost every little knob out in the barrens. You'd see them sitting up in the juniper trees, kind of picking at everything. They were just everywhere. Over time, obviously, hunting, for sure, changes of, you know, human activity and stuff. Populations have dwindled here. There's pockets of them around, but it's a bird that I haven't spent much time with at all. I would see glimpses of one kind of flying across the road, or never really had any opportunities. So anyways, heading into, I think it was February month, we were planning on heading out there for the weekend, and 2 days before I got a call, and he was saying that as he was heading down into Terrenceville, coming across the barrens, he said everywhere he looked, there were willow ptarmigan up in the trees. They were next to the road. They were running around. Luckily for us, we had massive amounts of snow, so it created like a winter wonderland. So anyways, heading out, I'll just give you a glimpse of the terrain.
Nice.
So this kind of gives you, as you're driving by. So it's just very vast, right? Whichever side of the road you look on, you basically, yeah. Okay.
That's the light that I see when I'm there, and I'm like, give me something now, anything to photograph.
Exactly. So I got very lucky. So for the 3 days we were there, I basically got to spend with these guys. So I've got tons of pictures. Luckily, I was able to get them in varying light. So cloudy days, sunny days.
Nice.
On my first day, this was probably one of the first shots I got. So I came across 3 that were sitting up in some juniper trees, and basically pulled around the side of the road, slowly belly crawled out, got in position, knew where the light was coming up, because of course you're in the barren, so there's not much obstructing the first rays of light. And luckily this one jumped out of the juniper tree and just kind of walked out just in this perfect open spot. So pretty stoked about that. At that point I was like, whatever happens the rest of the weekend, I'm good, right?
Isn't that the best when it starts that way? It just like
I know,
kills the pressure,
right?
and then I feel like you
Super
almost tend to
lucky.
do better once you don't have that pressure. I don't know if you maybe
Exactly.
just make more like instinctual, natural decisions versus like trying to calculate, like overthink it, you know? I don't know.
Exactly. And the thing is, you're willing to try things you probably wouldn't try, some backlit shots
That's
or
true.
whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
So I got lucky on that one. That was the evening, I think, that I just got there. Obviously, every opportunity I got out, whether it was in the morning or the evening, I went out looking for these guys. On this
That's
particular
That
occasion,
was nice.
I think this was in the evening, and this was this light, basically.
Oh, yeah.
This was right in that area. So we were in a vehicle driving down. Father-in-law was driving. Of course, my eyes are glued. There's no way I was driving, because I probably would have been in the ditch somewhere in the snowbank, right? So he was driving down, and I spotted this one just sitting there by itself. I think there was a group of about 30 or 40 on the other side of the road, and they were just kind of moving along, and this guy was just on its own. So I focused in on him. I included this picture in another one because I wanted to mention about backgrounds and how just a slight adjustment of your positioning, if a bird will stay or a subject will stay, can
Yeah.
totally change an image. So I love this one for the various layers, the light coming in through. Because it was such a windy evening, I said, I want to go backlight. And I could see with
Oh,
even
you
in
can
this
just see
shot,
it
you
there.
could
Yeah.
see it. So then I moved my position and got this one.
Oh,
So I wanted all that light kind of,
Yeah.
you know, the snow glowing with all the light. So yeah, luckily he stayed there for quite a little bit, and I was able to play around with some different compositions and such.
that's amazing that it just chilled there out in the open like that for you, and you were able to move around.
Oh yeah, and they they generally are
I mean, when did you
fairly-
pick up the stuffed bird and then put it away?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's funny because if, like any subject, I mean, if you spend, you know, that extra little bit of time approaching them slowly, letting them get used to seeing you and watching your movements, for the most part, you know, most subjects will accept you, right? As long as you're not making any big movements. So one other thing, of course, I've never seen, I mean, like I said, I've seen the occasional one running across the barrens or whatnot, but I wanted to grab a couple shots of them, you know, up in the, either in the juniper trees or playing around in the alders. So I kind of came up with this composition. The light, I think, had basically gone down at this point. But I kind of thought the contrast between all the alders, where it was so messy, tried to come up with somewhat of a clean composition, but I kind of thought that the contrast was nice there.
Just because it's all dark that it works, you know? If it wasn't like
Exactly.
darker back there, it'd just be a mess.
Yeah, if there was any light hitting this, it would just be shadows, stuff everywhere. It would just it
Yeah,
worked.
totally.
So these guys, like you say, you drive by and you wouldn't see any on the ground. You just look up in all the alders and you're just little, you know, there were just little fluff balls everywhere, right? Yeah.
Wow.
So another one here.
That's nice.
This was, I think, now heading into, let me get it. Yeah. So on the last, so like I said, I shot multiple days. So the last day was a cloudy day, and right away I was going, I want to go simplistic. I want to go, you know, take advantage of that white landscape, white bird, kind of just come up with some of these concepts. So, of course, here, I love this image just for the simple fact that he's actually up in the alder bushes.
Yeah, the white on white is sweet.
Yeah. So
Interesting how in the winter these ground birds that you're used to seeing out in the heather and stuff like that, once that stuff's snow covered, they have no choice but to get up into these shrubs. And it always seems funny to me when you see like sharp-tailed grouse and ptarmigans and that up in the trees.
Up in the trees.
Because they're not really like built for tree perching. Right?
No,
like
actually,
the shape of them.
Not
it
built
just
for a whole lot,
doesn't fit.
really.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Yeah.
Actually, in saying those perches, Jess, I think you posted not long ago, I think it was a grouse up in a big spruce tree, I think, or a pine tree or something. That picture is stunning.
I'll have to bring that up at some point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So again, like I focused in on like behavioral stuff,
That's
kind
really
of them
cool.
chewing away at the little, you know, and then I went
That
even
one.
try to go even
That's
more
sweet.
simplistic. Yeah, just really focusing in, let the landscape kind of fade out to nothing, basically.
Dude, this shot
With
to
that,
me
like-
would, yeah. I was just gonna say it
so
wouldn't
good.
work
Kinda
as
bring-
well without having those there. I mean, it's a great shot.
Yeah.
Just imagine them gone all white, but
Yeah.
man, those little things stepping right up to the height of the bird is just so perfect.
With
And
the foot raised too.
Yeah.
yeah. And I will say, I normally just get lucky with stuff. This was actually planned. So I was sitting in my vehicle off to the left and the right of this frame was a lot messier. And the group was basically transitioning across and just going on that plane. And I could see just those things, and I just stayed there. And I must have
Nice.
waited, I'd say 15 or 20 minutes before they felt comfortable enough to then kind of go across, and they went fast too. So it was just like one after the other. Then the next one would go, and then the next one would go.
And so
But
you're
yeah,
lucky that like more than one didn't go, and like you have a cluster, like a group of them, because that probably wouldn't have worked
Yep.
as clean either. You know.
And it's funny you mention it because there was one that had a little bit more of its, I guess I'll say summer plumage feather. It still had some of the brown in it, and he looked so nice. And I really wanted him because I thought maybe that would kind of pop. Of course, him and another one went at the exact same time. So I was like, great, I ruined that shot.
That's funny, man. Dude, this is the kind of shot when you wait for it like that, and you imagine like because you get there and you're like, if just a bird would go right there, right? It's like the if this would happen thing. And then when it
Oh,
does, it's hard to
Yeah.
not literally jump up and down sometimes.
Well, you know what's funny? Because in those moments, like you're just praying everything's going to work. And with white on white, I said, as soon as this bird moves, guaranteed the autofocus is going to go searching, and it's going to go. And luckily, it just stuck with him. And I wonder, too, maybe with the contrast of the black beak or the eye and staying on that same playing field with those the little twigs, because that's where I pre-focused there first.
I was just going to ask.
Just work. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I pre-focused on that first. So another image that I kind of envisioned throughout this, and luckily, like I said, at the end of the day, and we were actually heading home, packed up, vehicle ready, and my daughter was there too, so it was awesome. She got to witness all this, so it was really, really nice. Was I wanted a portrait of one, again, with just complete white, but to be able to see that little bit of red in the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, wait. This shot.
Oh.
Nice.
So yeah, I just wanted something. So I used a snowbank that was closer to me, and where he was, and I just peeked my lens just up enough, and he was just below it, and it just worked out
Nice.
really well. So I was
Yeah.
stoked about that one.
Yeah, just fading out of white. Yeah, it doesn't get much better for high key than that right there.
Yeah, exactly. It
That's
just
so
shows
cool.
the environment these guys are in, and it's funny because this year we've got like no snow.
Wow.
I think a day ago it snowed 5 centimeters, and it's going to be gone by tomorrow. My father-in-law has been up in the back of the hills and stuff, and he said he's come across a few of the rock ptarmigans and the willows, and they are abnormally skittish because they're white and
They can't hide.
everything else is brown and everything, so they are really
Wow.
flighty. Like he said, he can't get close to them at all. I guess they're just heightened nervous. I mean, you can imagine an eagle flying over a barren landscape going, oh, there's a white little moving dot. Let's nail that. You know what I mean? Like, they've got no chance, right? So, so for me, that was probably the biggest highlight, just simply because I've heard so many stories about it. It was almost like a glimpse into the past when, like I said, the landscape was full of these guys. And like I said,
That's
this
awesome,
year
man.
now, I went recently to Terranceville and didn't see not one.
Wow.
So it goes to show. And at that point, I was seeing 80 to 100 just in one little clump.
Yeah.
So,
Crazy how it'll change from year to year. Yeah, it's
I know, it's amazing.
a good reason or a good observation to take advantage of it when you have it.
Yeah.
Don't always assume it'll be there.
And then one other, I guess, image that stood out to me. Let's see if it's going to fall there. Yeah. So I've been working a lot, and Ray, obviously you pushed this, is trying to understand light, push my, the way I shoot and the angles that I shoot, and trying to come up with, I guess my own kind of lighting that I like. So one style that I've really, really been loving is that moment just as the sun is rising and it's creeping down, say the back, your background, you watch that sun coming down, and your subject is still in shade. And I find when you expose in those type of situations, your background just lights up. Like you're
So
getting the
golden.
craziest, vibrant colors. So if anyone has followed my work, you'll see a lot of that with my waterfowl images lately. But going into the year, I wanted to focus on getting some pictures of Wilson snipe because it was a subject that, we have them. They're plentiful here, but it's just one I haven't worked a lot with. So I kind of set some time in May month to really focus on them. And I have this one little spot. It's almost like a bowl-shaped area. It's a little small, little marshy area. And I know that there's a pair that breeds in that area. So
nice.
I went out one morning. I will admit I did not plan the frost that was on the landscape.
Oh, you didn't?
So that was kind of a bonus. No, I wish I did, but I didn't. But I did go out. I wanted to hit them early because in that area where it's the tall grass, if anyone's ever photographed snipe before, they know super shy, love to hide out in this thick stuff, very hard to see them out in the open, to get any clean images. So hitting them early in May, the grasses are all still flattened down, from the packed snow that was on top of them. They haven't had a chance to kind of lift up. So I went in knowing that if there were any there, I think it was like the first week in May, that chances are I would get looks at them, that they would just be out kind of going around feeding and going. So anyway, showed up well before sunrise, could actually hear them calling and whatnot, and waited in this one position where I knew that the light was going to come in. I've gone to that location many, many times for other subjects, and got very lucky. I got 4 frames, and I got that.
So good.
So again, this is the kind of light that I think I've been trying to do a lot with most of my subjects. That background is just getting hit, and probably say a minute later, not even, that whole foreground and everything around, and the bird is getting lit up as well, right? Here you're just getting the background lit up, the foreground's in shade, and that frost just wins it for me.
Dude, and you can see the bird's head is almost catching a little bit of that warmer
Almost,
light
it
too.
does. It catches that little hint.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, that window of opportunity is
It's
very
small, yeah.
short.
I love the
Very
blue and orange there. That
yeah.
Mhm.
One of my favorite. I've got a few different shots. I call them fire and ice.
Yeah.
I've got a fox shot that I really love too, or the red of the orange of the fox, and then there's a back hill that's completely in shade, and that blue just works, right?
I've been out with clients and actually said out loud audibly, I'm like, all right, we're going to work some Brad James lighting here. Yeah, because you do that so well.
Yeah, with my waterfowl,
awesome.
I've got a couple spots that work just so well. And the thing is,
Duck Lord.
Yeah, Duck Lord. Yeah, exactly. Well, like
There's
I said, that type of lighting.
That.
Yeah, that kind of lighting. Like I always, when I used to first started doing it, I always thought that you would need an object or objects behind you, say trees or just a hillside or whatever. But you can pull this off, like I said, with an open area, but your window of opportunity is so narrow. Because as that light, you can watch it creep down that background if you've got trees or whatever the case may be, and it's creeping down fast before then it hits your subject and the foreground.
Dude, the frost really adds such a nice touch to that. So
yeah,
great stuff,
definitely.
Dude.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks. So that's
all right, man. Jess, you're up.
I'm gonna stop.
Great. All right. So obviously this year was very different for everybody. And from as somebody who leads photo tours and workshops and things throughout the year, my travel schedule was obviously impacted a lot, but it ended up kind of being a silver lining in that I had a lot more time to shoot during the spring here in BC, because typically I have my loon workshops for the month of June, and I scout for that about 2.5, 3 weeks in advance. So there's basically a good 6-week chunk there that's taken up by that. So it is a little bit limiting in terms of what I can do for my own shooting, because I don't typically shoot at all during the tours. Sure. So I was trying to think about this year and what I could do that way. And because as great as leading the tours is, and it's a wonderful part of the province and part of the world to be in at that time of year, June, as I'm sure all of you know, being from the northern hemisphere, is pretty much when you want to be everywhere at once, especially further north here. It's like everything's kind of popping off at that point, and you really want to be kind of everywhere. So that's always sort of in the back of my mind, is that there's some things that I want to shoot for myself at that time of year. So this year I just said to myself, okay, I'm going to dedicate this time and not let it go to waste, because come next year, if all goes well and the tours are back up and running, I don't want to be sitting there going, dang, I wish I took advantage of all that free time. So I have a few photos here. Let me share my screen. I didn't actually shoot all that much this year. I just had kind of a big chunk in the spring when I did a lot of my shooting.
Nice.
But I want to share this sequence of images here. Let's see. You guys seeing that okay?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Oh.
So this was the first kind of shot of the spring season. Well, spring, it's -12 or whatever it was. But lecking sharp-tailed grouse. I camped out at this spot and used my tent as a blind for, I think, 3 nights. And I was hoping to get them in the sun, and just the conditions weren't quite lining up. The sun popped one morning.
We're only seeing the thumbnails right now, just a heads up.
Oh, you are? Okay. Oh, interesting. Let me see here. I might have to bring these up in Finder.
Because you know what? It's the way that Bridge does that preview. I think it actually doesn't show the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay,
There's also like a film
here.
strip view that will view it larger right in Bridge without hitting the spacebar, I think.
Might be able to. You seeing that at all?
No.
That coming up?
Nope.
I wonder down at
Classic.
the bottom where it's.
You know what? Here, I'll open them in Photoshop. That'll work.
Yeah, that'll
better.
work. Yeah.
You can see all my
Yep.
trickery
That'll
now.
totally work, yeah. Yeah, I think that quick look stuff for whatever reason
How funny,
doesn't
hey?
show through, which is weird because it's on the screen. So I don't know why it doesn't get picked up, but
Classic live shenanigans. There we go. How's that? Is that coming up?
You know what? Did you share just Bridge
Let me go back into here. Let me share
in
that
Zoom? Try
now.
sharing just the desktop instead of just Bridge.
Yeah.
That's probably why they weren't showing.
There we go.
Yep.
There we are.
There we
Cool.
go. Yep. Now you're good.
Wow.
Perfect.
Okay,
Oh,
right on.
look at that.
Yeah, so camped out here for a few nights, and it was a tricky situation because there was quite a bit of snow, but there was still enough snow coming up through, or enough grass coming up through the snow that there was only a few little windows, and where they lek is quite a narrow little area. But basically the males come in and they dance like this and they tap their feet. And so I'm trying to get some action. This happens from about an hour before sunrise. So much of the good action happens when you can't barely even see what's happening outside.
Oh wow.
Just waking up to the sounds of these guys is just unbelievable.
They sound like little mini jackhammers, don't they? They're like,
yeah, completely. It's the
rooting and
weirdest
tooting
sound.
around.
Let me see if I can pull up a sound here on this app.
Oh, yeah,
It's
that would be
worth
cool.
hearing. It's pretty ridiculous. I'm not sure what's on here for.
That
Let's see here.
little kick up of snow is
This is the sound of their little. Anyways, it's just a bizarre experience.
Nice.
And this is kind of the first shoot of the spring that I started off, and it went more or less pretty well. The next day, the light popped just perfectly. And then as soon as that happened, a gyrfalcon came in and the whole, 50 of them flushed, and that was it for the experience. But other than that, I
really?
got some reasonable stuff on the cloudy day. But the sort of sequence of shots I wanted to share was just this kind of sequence of events that happened in the spring here that led me to each of these shots. And I kind of concentrated my work mostly this spring in one particular area. So this is the first shoot. And when I was camped out here spending, long nights in the tent, it was still pretty early in the spring. So a lot of time just sitting, waiting, reading, and waiting for the light. And during the evening, I was hearing a saw-whet owl. And I marked on my phone where the closest sort of little patch of trees that I suspected the male could be calling from. And the following day I snowshoed in there and found the female incubating in this nest. And
Wow.
it was probably towards the end of the day, I spent several hours walking around and looking at different cavities and trying to figure out if the male that I was hearing, in fact, had a female somewhere in there. And sure enough, this was actually taken later on in the spring when she was just about to fledge. The young were just about to fledge, rather. But basically, if I hadn't have been shooting those grouse and camping out at that spot, I wouldn't have heard the saw-whet owl, which ended up being a really nice shoot later on in the season.
That's so cool.
And in driving to this spot, to where I was actually able to park and hike way into where the saw-whet was, I found a male calliope that was hanging out right where I parked. And I kind of had my eyes set for these guys. I was kind of trying to figure out where they might be. So I was kind of honing in a little bit on looking for these guys. And sure enough, it was right where I happened to park and pull off the road where I was hiking into the saw-whet owl every now and then. And this guy ended up being just posted up on the perfect spot right alongside the road. And they're not overly scarce. So you do see them, but it's very infrequent that you actually see them where they're eye level like this.
Okay.
And this was one of those shoots where I'm sure you guys have all had this, where you look at your first image and it's like this little dot in the middle and your background's kind of funky, but then you just slowly kind of chip away at it. And he was so habitual to this one perch that by the end of it, I was on my tailgate with my one tripod leg up on my roof, and I'd like back the car right in as far as I could off the road, basically right to where he was sitting. And if you've photographed around hummingbirds before, you'll know like how habitual they are to single perches. They're just back and forth to the same ones.
Yeah.
So even when you would leave for a while, it's just a matter of waiting for 5 or 10 minutes. And yeah, this is pretty much full frame, and it's I think the smallest bird in North America. So that was a goal I had this spring, was to hopefully shoot one of these guys and get something away from feeders and out in the wild. So, and again, that was all because of that sequence of events. And while waiting for this guy, waiting for the light to get a little better, I ended up photographing this lynx, and it was just so ridiculous to look back on this whole thing and see, if I hadn't been in this spot shooting this subject, I would have seen this. And down below me in the pond, just behind where the calliope hummingbird was, there's a bunch of ruddy ducks all courting. And if you've spent time around those guys, you know how noisy and ridiculous they are. They do a lot of running on the water, so you hear them long before you see them. And I heard this big splash at one point, and I figured that it was the ruddy ducks just kind of getting after one another in the middle of the lake. But it ended up being a lynx jumping into the water trying to get waterfowl. And so I eventually clued into what was happening. Yeah, it was ridiculous. And cool. It was funny because at the start, I didn't realize what was happening. And then I finally clued into this being a lynx. And I actually think that there was a second one in this area because this one was calling back and forth. And they make really, really strange sounds. And if it's not something you hear, obviously, very often, so sometimes it catches you by surprise. But eventually I thought, okay, well, I thought originally that it had swam across the lake and was getting out on the other side. I didn't realize it was actually hunting ducks. And I figured, well, okay, well, if the first one swam across, there's a decent chance the second one's going to follow it if it's, a kitten or something. So I go all the way down to the water. I set up, I'm waiting for 10 minutes. And sure enough, I see this thing, this mammal swimming across the water, thinking it's this lynx's head. So I'm getting all ready. It's coming right towards me. And then here's this little muskrat just like swimming across, swimming across the water. So I quickly abandoned that plan and realized that the second one wasn't going to come, and ended up being able to track this one further up. I hiked for 45 minutes or an hour and managed to get back onto where it ended up going after it had been hunting around this lake. Wow. So totally serendipitous, and again, wouldn't have happened at all had it not been for those previous images. So that was kind of a crazy sequence there from the spring. That's
wonderful how one thing connects to another.
Yeah, I think that's the part of it that I like best, is just focusing on something. Like I always try to have a plan, but being open to what you're hearing and what you're observing. And so that was a big part of it for me this spring, is just being in a concentrated area and just kind of trying to tick off a few things that I was really interested in, but also just being open to, obviously you're not gonna say no to trying to photograph a lynx. So that was really lucky.
Were you scared of that thing? I mean, like, I'm scared of it.
Yeah, I think it probably looks a lot more imposing in the photo, but they probably max out around 35 or 40 pounds. But that doesn't mean much, because a house cat can do a number on you pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Enough. But no, I don't think there's ever really been any documented, unless they're cornered or something like that. I mean, I'm sure when they're
like defensive,
doing. Yeah, if they have them in a trap or after they've tranquilized them doing research projects or something, I'm sure they're pretty ornery, but they're more curious than anything. And they just kind of, usually they'll just sort of slowly wander away from you. But yeah, it's probably best not to think about it too much, because again, if you think about what a cat that weighs 4 pounds can do, it's, I'm sure if these guys want it, we're motivated enough. I guess just a couple more from the spring here. This was kind of my main project for the spring, was photographing fly-mulated.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, this was a crazy experience this spring, and I never thought I'd come away from this whole project with anything like this. But I think I just paid my dues with walking for enough days, day after day, and eventually was rewarded. But fly-mulateds were sort of, I knew that I might just have one window in the next foreseeable few years if I continued to do these tours during the spring to really hone in on these guys. And I'm glad I definitely got a few that I think I'd like to go back and try to get a bit more activity with them hunting insects and things like that. But definitely came away with a few that I was, they're pretty much in 100% insectivores. They have been documented taking small rodents and things, but I found a couple nests this year, and watching them come in, it's amazing how, if you're used to being around other raptor nests, typically if they're hunting big prey, they might just come in once or twice a day, or with great grades, it's usually maybe a half dozen times. But with these guys, sometimes it's literally every 2 minutes they're coming in with a cricket or
it's like songbirds
or something. Yeah, exactly. It's really cool to see. I got to spend time with them at night watching how they actually hunt. And
dude, I didn't even know this species existed until you shared this photo. So that's thanks for that. But also, what's the size of them? Like compared to like a screech or something like that?
Yeah. So these are the smallest owl in Canada, and they're just slightly bigger than an alpha owl. So they're really, really tiny. So finding these guys roosting was a real project in itself. My main goal was to try to find nests just to sort of be in their area and have a reliable spot. But yeah, they're definitely, they look markedly smaller than a saw-whet when you see them roosting. They're definitely tiny little guys. But they look a lot more like a spruce or a screech rather. They used to be in the same genus, but then they've split them since then.
Okay.
But yeah, really cool bird. So that was kind of my main subject for the spring. And I admittedly haven't done a ton of shooting through the summer and the fall, but yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff, man. Great stuff. All right. I'll just do, I'll hit a quick, couple of, interesting things that I had this past year. These hooded mergansers, every year they're in my backyard. And so, I photographed them for 10 years straight, and I've always wanted them in the snow. And this particular shot was, it was like forecast to rain, and we rarely get snow here in Southern Jersey. And so it was forecast to rain, and I had already gone out and done a workshop that morning, came back home, and I'm sitting right here at the desk working on stuff in the office. And I look out, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's snowing. All right. It'll probably be done in 5 minutes. It'll turn to rain, and I look back out again. Oh, it's still snowing, and then an hour later it's still snowing. Now the ground's covered. And I'm like, I don't know. Have you guys ever had that experience where you just kind of, maybe you've already done your outing, or you've just kind of committed to, I'm not going out today. Like, I'm just going to stay in and do this. And then the circumstances change, and maybe there's a reason to go out, and now it's like it's this almost insurmountable ordeal to kind of convince myself to just get dressed in all the stuff I need to get in, to get to go out in the snow, to cover the camera in all the stuff it needs just to get out there. And so it just felt like I'm looking at it, and it's like, oh, that's beautiful, and then I'm like, oh, but I got to do all this work to go out there, and then I'm starting to convince myself, right? I'm like, there's not going to be anything out there. Like the birds aren't going to be cooperative. Thankfully, when I drove back from the workshop that morning, I had seen the hoodies on the pond, and there was a good number of them. So like if there was only one or two, I would have convinced myself that they had left already for the day. But there was like a dozen on there. So I'm like, there's probably some left. So, all right, fine, I'll do it. And like I begrudgingly go outside, and it was one of those crazy circumstances, from the time I closed my door and walked out the door, within 5 minutes, I'm taking this photo. I walked over to this pond, went down to the edge, and they swam in my general direction. Cause thankfully, from all the workshops I had done with these birds, I had natural hide already set up in the area. So I was able to just kind of walk right down and just creep under there. And that's something else. I've never been able to walk up on these birds to this pond. Like they always see me, they always swim away. But I kind of wonder, with all the heavy falling snow, if there was just so much movement in the air or something like that, it just, it kind of like distracted my movement walking up, because in 10 years, I've never been able to walk up to the edge of this pond and not have them all swim right to the opposite shoreline. And for whatever reason, this day I was able to walk up. They were like right around the corner, this one little cove. And then a moment later, this one and a female actually swam over and were right in front of me. And I was just lighting it up, and I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening. It's like insane. So that was definitely just like a local highlight. But then outside of that, some of the other highlights, obviously, going to Alaska was amazing. But then, and I'll get to that in a second, but after that, in October, about a month later after I got back from Alaska, I ended up making a trip out to dry tortugas off the coast of Florida, out in the Gulf of Mexico. And just a family trip with my sister and her boyfriend, going out to camp out there. And I wasn't expecting much. And then I got there, and just the fall migration of warblers was insane. And I've only seen Cape May warblers like twice, and just very in passing. And all of a sudden there was Cape May warblers everywhere. So that was just incredible. And to be able to like see them, and they have, it's kind of sad why there's so many of them there, and why they don't care about you is because there's just not a lot of resources on this island. And it's like the one place for them to stop on their migration south if they get pushed down. And so a lot of them, unfortunately, I've heard and read, kind of die there because there's not enough resources for them to kind of, recover and move on. But they're just frantically feeding all day long, and they just don't care about you at all. So, it's sad, but if you just literally stand in one spot, next thing you know, they're coming in right in your face. And this was just shot with a 300 millimeter lens on a full frame camera. Like I didn't have a teleconverter. I didn't crop this. Like it was just, they were close, Wow. But yeah. Anyway, like all these warblers, that's not it. Were just out on this island, and then the other part that was really neat was being able to photograph them on like a sandy beach, because up here in Jersey, I always see them in the forests and fields and stuff like that. So to see these redstarts like picking up insects out of the sand and stuff like that was so cool. And then you would just lay there, and then in a second, like I had one land on my head at one point, because they didn't care. Like if you lay down, they were just all over you. And so it was just an incredible experience, black-throated blues on the beach and stuff like that. It was like, not at all what I was expecting. So it was a total kind of surprise trip, as far as the bird photography. So that was definitely a highlight as well. So much so that I'm running a workshop there next year, because it's like, how do you pass that stuff up? I mean, like,
do you take a boat from Key West to get out there or something? Or
yeah, you take a boat out there. That's the other thing, right? So it's kind of, so there's no power, no water, no anything. You have to bring all your stuff with you. But for doing that kind of camping, it's really easy, because you just load it all up on a boat. They give you wheelbarrows when you get there, and you just kind of unload it. So it's like, it's really easy to kind of do this more, rugged camping. And the boat takes, I don't know, maybe I would guess 300 people out there. So when the boat gets out there and lets everybody off, there's, just people everywhere and swimming and snorkeling. But then 3:00 rolls around and the boat leaves. And if you're one of the few campers, you feel like you have this island to yourself. There's maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 people left on the island after the boat leaves. And, it's, kind of spread out. So you just, you have this place to yourself. And like every one of these photos, there wasn't a single person near me or around. It was just me wandering around and laying on the beach and just hanging out with these birds by myself, and just absolutely incredible. And, you'd shoot a redstart like this, and then turn around and then have like a black-bellied plover with like the most amazing water, Yeah. So yeah, just absolutely incredible trip. So I can't wait to kind of
see that sanderling there.
Yeah, the sanderling was
beautiful.
Yeah, and this again, all of these, just because I wasn't prepared, I didn't think there was going to be much out there from all the research I had done. I had my D4S with just the 300 millimeter on it. And I didn't even go out there with a fully charged battery. It was only 2/3 charged. And I get out there and I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to be here for 3 days and there's birds everywhere. Like, what am I going to do? That battery lasted for the entire 3 days of shooting.
Wow. Crazy.
On a 2/3 charged battery. Yeah, it was nuts. No way. So yeah, that was really, really cool. But yeah, I'll just kind of touch on some of the amazing stuff. The trip up to Alaska with Jamin was absolutely by far just one of the best highlights. In the video,
I heard you just stuck your head out the car for this one too.
Yeah,
hey,
just
right there.
This hike, this was the hike where it's like we saw them and then we both look at each other. We're down those white tiny specks up there. Yeah, that's them. All right, let's do it. Like we both like begrudgingly, we're kind of like, all right, I guess we're going to do this right now. And then we start the hike, and it was like an hour in, and we're finally like up above that, like kind of the scrub line there. Yep. And at that point,
we didn't see them for a while.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, once we started hiking, like they were nowhere to be seen. We're like, shoot, are we doing all this for nothing?
Exactly, man. Jamin, there was multiple times on that hike. I'm like, this sucks. Like we don't even see them right now. Like I'm just hurting, going up this, cause it was, the majority of it, no trail. Like we're just bushwhacking our way through. But then we crossed we came around that one bend, and you looked up and you saw the one, you're like, there's one. It was just like game on. And it was instantly, it went from, this is the worst thing ever to this was all worth it. It was just amazing how fast having the wildlife show up changed that mindset,
That's a crazy ram too. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, right. I've never seen one of these before. And this was my first experience with them, with this massive, there's a pair of them there, just two of them like this size. And yeah, so I was so glad I brought the wide angle lens up, because like this one was 46 millimeter, just to be able to show off the habitat up there. I mean, I was sitting maybe 15 feet from these two rams, just chilling up there like that. And this was shot with a 300 millimeter, so like just in your face close. So like this, going up there and seeing that was the highlight of my life, and definitely one of the highlights of the year. So just absolutely incredible. And I could go I can go on and on and on, but I know we have a few questions in the comments here. So I'd say let's jump to that. Let me stop sharing real quick here, bring all of our beautiful faces up on the screen, and let's see. Who said, oh God? All right. Much earlier on, Nick Carson asked, what photography rule do you break most often and why? I'm going to give a quick answer because something popped into my head on that. The photography rule, the wildlife photography rule that I learned so much in the beginning was have the sun at your back, have the sun at your back, have the sun at your back. And that was one that I just absolutely love to break right now and shoot directly into the sun. And I know we've all shown and taken photos that way that just kind of prove that, the sun doesn't always have to be at your back to have, a really good wildlife shot. So that's one that stands out to me. Anybody else have any that stand out?
One that I think, and I think Ray, you might be very similar to, I think you touched on this at one point, is to, not be so hypercritical about sharpness over emotion in an image. I'd rather have an image that conveys emotion, has crazy light, there's just something special about it. And if it's not tack sharp from the front of the beak to the back feather, I don't care. I'm not saying I will post blurry images and
there's a fine line there, right?
So I think a lot of times when we start off with photography, a lot of people tend to lean towards the technical side and want to learn all the settings and make sure everything's perfect on a tripod. I find as I've gone further, I'm just wanting to capture the light, some type of emotion in that shot, and I'm not just sitting there like jamming everything down, make sure nothing moved, don't breathe. I'm just shooting. I want to get that moment, and I don't really care that it's, like I said, sharp from front to back, but that's just personal.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit that's kind of in the background of that statement, and that is you've already kind of really nailed down the technical aspects of your shooting, so you really like a maybe not technically perfect image. I think for any of us at this point, compared to a not technically perfect image, at least for myself, 10 years ago, 6 years ago, are two very different things, so I went through a period of where everything had to be so perfectly sharp, and I was ditching good shots because it was just the tiniest bit off when I zoomed into 1,000%, and it's like, who's ever going to see that? You know what I mean? Yeah. But if you view the image overall and it's out of focus, meanwhile, I'm posting a bunch of out of focus photos on purpose right now lately, but in general, if it hurts your eyes to look at it, then you're still going to pass on that. But I very much agree with you. There's totally images that I have in my catalog now that I'm happy with that, like if you zoom in all the way, it ain't tack sharp, it's an image that 3 years ago I would have thrown out.
I wonder if there's a bit of an arc to that too. Like when you're first starting off, you're sort of naive to all the techie side of things, or how sharp an image really needs to be, or what sharp truly is. And then you're sort of, you get super obsessive about it. And then it starts to kind of be like, oh, well, it's not everything about an image. There's all these other things like Brad, you're saying. So I wonder if that's sort of an arc that's typical for people.
I think so. And I bet that arc kind of goes like that and then dips down just a little bit. Like you don't go back down to where you started. You know what I mean? There's just a little bit of dip on the end of that curve at the end, where you kind of start taking into account all the other stuff as much. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Even if your images aren't suffering, it's like you're not thinking about it too much because it's more, just a subconscious thing that's happening in the field. You're not having to scrutinize everything. But
Totally. Anybody else have anything to add on that before we hit another question? I think there's two more questions I want to hit, and then we'll kind of wrap it up because we're getting a little long here. Anybody else have anything they want to add on that one, though?
I think one thing that I've found is, when you first start out doing anything, whether it be photography or whatever, a lot of the spots that we find now, or that people are finding to go out and shoot a given species or just a general location, obviously it's good to go to places that are going to be productive and that you can confirm with people that have been there, like, okay, yeah, this is a good spot at this time of year. But I think there's a lot to be said for just going out and picking a general area and just trying to use your eyes and ears and trying to just kind of pick up on what's happening there without any real preconceived notions of this. I have to be here at this time of day, or I'm here to get this one species. And I think that was something that I really that really jumped out at me this year was that as much as I try to really prioritize being in the right spot at the right time for this species, and I'm pretty methodical about things, there's definitely something to be said for just being outdoors and being in an area where you never know what's going to happen, and just trying to rely on knowledge of calls and habitat and things like that, and just kind of letting things play out. So I think maybe not getting stuck in the rut of always going to the same place that everyone else is going, or the place that is deemed to be the best spot for a given species. Or
No, that sounds great.
sometimes I think just winging it.
Yeah, but
Off the beaten path.
again, I think that comes with some requirements in there, and that is you got to know habitat, you got to know calls, you got to know, you have to know some of the stuff about what you may witness, or else you're going to miss it. Like I think, Jess, you have so much experience, being outdoors and knowledge of the wildlife that you go after, that you can put yourself in that scenario and start picking up on these little clues and these little things. And, oh, there's this particular type of habitat. There might be some of this in there. Let me actually pay attention and listen to that a little bit more. Right. Whereas I know for myself in the beginning, if you just threw me out there, I was just wandering blind, man. I'd be hearing stuff all over the place, have no clue what I was hearing, didn't even know what to go after. Like, is this a good bird? Is it not? Whereas now I can hear like, oh, that's just a chickadee that's in my backyard. I don't really care. I don't have to pay attention to that. Or, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. But that's great advice. I do agree that, and it's also a little bit more fun to kind of just sometimes go out and just see what happens. Right.
I think we could all probably learn from that too, in terms of, being at a higher level in terms of our own photography than we would have been in the very beginning. Is that we were talking about this, I think, when we had a chat, just to sort of hash out, how this kind of conversation might work, and talking about how, scrutinizing every little detail, being like, oh, there's a tiny ripple on the water, or, the clouds coming in a little heavy today, and just sort of throwing our plans away. But yeah,
he's pointing to his own photo on the wall.
I was going to say, yeah.
No, my son came down. I was telling him to go back.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I think something about just not overthinking stuff too, and just kind of like you're talking about making the plan for those hooded mergansers. Like you probably could have talked yourself out of that really quickly by just being like, it's getting kind of late in the day or whatever. But sometimes just like, okay, I'm doing it, getting out there, and you never know, you might be surprised.
Exactly. Yeah. And being okay with those times where you're going to go out there and it doesn't work out, that's like, I still am not okay enough with it. There's so many times where I still get frustrated at myself because I want to be more successful, or it's like, oh, I should just go scout for this, but then, I got to get the shot. And I think I have to start skewing more towards the just be out there and just spend the time. And it's okay if you don't have a shot. Like I have too much stuff that I can't even share to begin with right now. Like, why do I need to keep doing that more and more and capturing more of those, the shots that I've already done 5, 6, 7 times for year after year, where I can maybe just go out and sit there and be quiet and listen and experience something new and something different, and maybe find something totally new because of that. So I know for myself, I definitely want to start doing more of that, even though I kind of suck at doing it.
This year was different for me because I started working from home. And so I had a bunch of places in Anchorage where I work, where I could go and reliably find stuff, and I knew it was there, and knew when to go and everything like that. And so working from home was totally different, and just kind of like going to new spots, it forced me to like try some different things and look for some local places. And I ended up finding a bunch of great spots just because of that, just because of the limiting, factor with working from home. So, just to go along with what Jess was saying of trying new areas, that's kind of, when you're forced to do that, sometimes it can yield some, really interesting things. So that was pretty cool.
It's too easy to just go out and always go to the known spot or just the more exciting spot, right? Meanwhile, when you spend that time locally, you're like, oh, wow, all this is right here. It's incredible. Yeah. Yep. I hear that from a lot of people I've talked to this year because of that, because they've been forced to stay home, and they're all this over and over again. I've heard, oh, it's amazing what was in my backyard that either I didn't know, or B, I just never spent the time to commit to. So yeah, that's all great. Let's see. Next question, real quick. Terry Joshi asks, camera tips for shooting white on white snow. We'll go ahead and leave that for you northern guys. Me and Emilie are out on that one.
White sand beaches down there, maybe.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's
right.
true.
Snowy egret.
Yeah.
Brad, why don't you take it? Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that I always try to keep in mind, where I shoot pretty much everything manually, because your camera is going to read everything so bright that it's going to have a tendency to want to underexpose. Yeah. So a lot of times you're going to get images that are going to look gray, they're going to look too dark. So I'll usually turn on some exposure compensation and go up to say, +1 or even sometimes higher than that. Also look at the environment. I think that's around you. I don't know too many occasions where you're getting everything white. Sure. But try to find something that's got a little bit of contrast. So like in terms of those willow ptarmigan, I mean, their beak is dark and then their eyeballs dark. So try to focus on that. Or if you've got something that is on the same playing field as them, like those little twigs, pre-focus there. I think that's the only tips I can. Yeah.
How about you, Jamin? You have a little experience with some snow, I think.
Yeah, little bit.
Yeah.
I tend to underexpose just a touch, a stop or so, and that usually allows me to go back into Lightroom and do some adjustments there. But yeah, it can be killer unless you get some nice flat light, and then you can, which happens a lot. We get a lot of flat light just because in the wintertime it kind of, or just dull gray, which can really suck. And that's a different story. But you just kind of got to read the meter, and then I just kind of underexpose a little bit when I need to, or if it's gray out, I'll overexpose because you got to get a little bit more light in there.
Yeah.
So it's
run into tricky situations like that snowshoe hare with white on, like that awesome shot with the dark background you showed earlier.
Really.
That's a whole nother ball game when you have. I think that's where maybe like shooting. Do you shoot manual primarily?
Yeah, I shoot manual. Yeah, and I underexpose that one, and then in Photoshop or in Lightroom, I did some specific radial filters on the hair to bring out some of that color or bring out some of that white a bit. Yeah. There's always going to be, some post work with some of that stuff. I had a Lynx photo last year, a couple Lynx photos that actually, like, somehow I got spot on my on my exposure, and like they came out so good. Like I didn't have to do much, but
I love the confidence there. You're like, somehow
it just all worked out. Lynx is like walking towards me on this trail, and it
that's great.
Worked out really well. So
I like to throw in one. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to throw in one little tip. I get outside of the camera setting aspect, but when editing my images, when I've got white like that in Photoshop, I'll actually switch my background to white, and that because it's a pure white, I'm able to pick up if there's more blue hues, if there's different color, and I can almost match it. And then, like I said, even with some of the shots that I showed earlier, where I'm almost wanting things blowed out, so it's just the subject. Mm-hmm. I know how far I can push it because I've got that white to kind of compare, right?
Yeah.
That's great because
I think histograms are everything too. Sorry, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna. If you're viewing it on black, then it's gonna look pure white. Meanwhile, it could be like pretty gray at that point. And then what were you saying about histograms? Because I want to hear that because it's funny. I think I don't touch histograms or view them at all. So I'd love to hear what you have to say on that, Jess.
Yeah, I think. Does everybody else here shoot Nikon?
Yeah,
I think pretty much. Yeah, so
really?
At least some of the older Canon cameras, the dynamic range was way far off what Nikon had, even in the prosumer bodies. Sure. And I've got some pretty aging Canon bodies, and the dynamic range isn't near what some of the newer ones are. So I think I've struggled with that a lot in the past, and I've really had to utilize a histogram. I pretty much use histograms all the time if ever I'm shooting a subject that's particularly dark or particularly bright. I use them pretty religiously. And I find that oftentimes white on white is viewed as this really, really tricky scenario, which it can be if the light's changing, but more often than not, like you were saying, Jamin, when you have that flat winter kind of duller overcast, it can be pretty much set at once and you're good for potentially hours, as long as the light's not changing much. And as long as you confirm it with that histogram, if you're not changing your settings and the light isn't changing all that much, you can pretty much just do it once and not really have to touch things. So that's something that I've really utilized pretty heavily, and especially in the last number of years. But I guess now with the advent of some of the newer cameras with, having a live exposure inside the camera, inside the viewfinder, and also just the extended dynamic range where you can afford to just kind of underexpose things a bit and then bring it back. But I've just felt like I haven't had that luxury as much with what I shoot with. But potentially, if upgrading down the road, it might not be as much a part of the workflow in the field, but.
Yeah, but if you can always nail it closer to begin with, that's always a good thing anyway. With that histogram, obviously, if you're shooting white on white in a lot of snow, you're going to have, like, that histogram is going to be pinned to the right. So what are you looking for there? Are you looking to have it just kind of pushing right up against that edge, but not actually going off the edge of the right side of the
exactly.
histogram? Okay. All right.
Yeah. And in some, like some creative applications, like Brad, that shot that you showed earlier of just the floating head of that one male willow ptarmigan, like that's the type of thing where, we have this idea that every shot needs to have detail in the blacks and the whites and you can't clip, but sometimes, clipping can be a really good way of, like, Terje's photos are photos that come to mind, like a lot of his high key stuff. This stuff is actually blown right out, like some of his backlit waterfowl and stuff on the snow. But it's obviously an artistic, kind of choice he's making to do that. In the field, it might have some texture, but allowing stuff to just blow out. So maybe not obsessing as much about having detail all the time is something also to consider.
Very much agree. Yeah. When you guys say you're shooting manual, are you shooting full manual, all three settings, or is it manual with auto ISO? Because for me, whenever I go into manual, I'm like full manual, everything. If I'm using auto ISO, for me, I'm in aperture priority, which is, I'm probably like 50% of the time switch it back and forth. So what are you guys in when you're in manual? Is it auto ISO or just full manual?
I'm full manual. I've never been happy with auto ISO.
I do auto ISO.
Yeah. How about you, Jess?
Yeah, I'm fully manual.
Okay. And then Emily?
I just started learning manual.
Perfect. Okay, cool.
But yeah, Andreas, Dan the Ripper.
Yeah.
He is really helping me. But I don't use auto ISO. So yeah, I do all manual. I'm trying. So,
well, before that though, what were you using?
Aperture priority.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm always hesitant to tell anybody like what's the best, because I think, like, as you just saw, right, we've all created amazing photos here, and we all kind of have our own method of working and what works for you. So like, I don't ever think there's this is the only way, this is the best way, it's like, what's the best for you and how you shoot and what you're getting out of it, And so I think it's kind of neat that, seeing the five of us all kind of have, a little bit of a mix match of different stuff. And then again, meanwhile, when you see the photos, like how many people are even asking that or questioning that when you see, like, when we just look through all of those photos, it never once crossed my mind of like, what metering mode were you in? What exposure mode were you in? It was just like, oh, that's an amazing photo. Look, the light is amazing there. That moment is amazing. Like, that's all that mattered in the end, So how you got there, I don't think was, as important as what you got in the end. Not to say you can ignore these settings and not, like that they're unimportant, but I think they could be a little overthought again, like we were talking about with so many things, like Jess, you were mentioning with the just overthinking it with like the plans and getting out there. I think some of this stuff can be overthought, even touching on that histogram thing, like they can't be clipped anywhere. And like, no, some of that stuff, it looks good in the end. Who cares how you got there?
I think it's like a tools in the tool belt type of analogy too, I think, because it's the sort of thing where, if when I go down to the tropics and I'm shooting in patchy dappled light in the rainforest, and I'm shooting some understory bird that's going from a sunlit area to a deeply shaded patch.
Massive exposure.
As much as we like to think that we can keep up with all that in manual, I mean, nobody can. It's physically impossible. So that's when, like, having familiarity with, aperture priority, like you're saying, Emily, like that will serve, even if you do transition to shooting full manual, that will serve you really well when all of a sudden you're out there with the egrets and you've got a day with the sun going in and out of clouds and it's happening too fast to keep up. Like that's the type of thing where all of a sudden you can just shift into that and you're like, okay, well, I know this from a couple of years back. It's still in there. And it's just about, I think, choosing the right tool for the job.
It gives you more options down the road. Yeah, very much agree. Very much agree. We had one last question. Let's just answer it real quick, and then I think we'll wrap it up. John Beck asks, are any of us doing video, and what's the balance of video and stills, and do any of us feel that that's going to change over time? So obviously I'm diving a lot more into video. I still think I'm always going to be a still photographer first, and a lot of the video I'm doing is kind of in support of my still photography, even though I am loving doing all this video stuff, and it's like a whole new thing to learn, and it's exciting. But for me, I'm going to certainly do more video, but it's still, stills is always going to be my main thing. Any of you guys messed with video much?
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you. Sorry, Emily, didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good.
I've been doing some video for the last year, doing a lot of that kind of stuff, and it's fun. But like you, it kind of augments and supports my photography, which is always going to be probably my main love, So.
Nice.
But yeah, I want to do more of it though.
Emily, you're playing with some more video now, right?
Yeah, I think it's super fun. I haven't gotten like super technical or editing or any of that stuff, but I think it's something.
It's easier that way. The editing sucks.
Yeah, after hearing you talk like how you edit for hours and hours and hours on videos, I'm like, I'll just edit it on my iPhone and
I spent 2.5 hours doing audio for a 15-minute video clip the other day.
Yeah, that would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
But I think it's fun to take video because obviously like the things that we're shooting move. So it's like nice to see them moving, and like doing slow-mos is fun, and when they're fishing and that kind of stuff. It's just something different, like I love obviously shooting photos, but I think video is just kind of like also it's just something fun, I guess.
Nice complimentary addition to it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I enjoy seeing it. So I enjoy sharing it too, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Either of you guys doing video? Brad, Jess?
Yeah, I've done it in the past, a little bit when moments, if I was sitting in a blind somewhere at a nest site or something like that, I might switch over to video and record some of the stuff going on. But no, I'm still trying to figure out photography and taking pictures yet.
Sounds good.
Can't get into the videos yet. No.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Jess?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much in the same boat as Brad, and just it's always kind of an afterthought of like, okay, well, I know that I've got the shot I wanted, then flick it over to video kind of thing. But I think in promoting tours and doing a little more of the video side of things, I've started to try to do a little bit more of that, and it is fun because a lot of the time I feel like showing photos amongst this kind of group that we're all photographers and we all love all this side of things and we know what goes into getting the stills. We all obviously loved seeing each other's work, but I think sometimes showing video of a subject that might be a little more kind of a niche sort of oriented photo that like not everyone's going to know what a flammulated owl is. And showing people video of that, I think that are non-birders or people that might not be as acquainted with stuff, it maybe connects with people more. Like for example, I always think of this, like if I'm going to sit down and watch a nature documentary, I'd probably rather watch video than just a bunch of like a slideshow of still images, right? So I think video really helps to connect in that way. And there's some moments that don't really lend that well to stills, but for whatever reason, whether it's the movement of the subject, lend itself really well to video. Like Emily, your waxwing clips come to mind where it's in the wind and they're all kind of jumping around and things like that might not necessarily translate to a still, or it might be the light's not quite right to shoot action, but in video you can make it happen. But I think what has dissuaded me is the gear side of things. Like if you were to really do it at a high level, it seems like you're floating blind with your whole setup. I'm just like, I imagine myself trying to coordinate that and just being like over it in 10 minutes. I admire it a lot though. It's pretty cool that you've got that all set up.
Yeah. No, the gear side of the video stuff is just, there's so much of it. But, for me right now, I'm enjoying the aspect of, it's like I'm learning photography again almost, because it's like figuring out all this stuff, learning editing software again, and just trying to teach myself a lot of this new stuff. So there's a lot of excitement there because I'm learning it all. Whereas I haven't really had that for a while with stills, there's just hasn't been that same learning excitement. There's certainly excitement out in the field, but that's just been something that's been fun lately.
What would you say for people, like if somebody's a still photographer that wants to shoot a few video clips now and then when they're out there as kind of an afterthought, like are there a couple things that you would recommend that are kind of easy but kind of critical steps that they could take to make sure they get something reasonable?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just figuring out how to stabilize the camera and get a still thing. The one of the easiest ways I started shooting video clips was when I was shooting anything on the ground. So shorebirds and waterfowl, because I was on a ground pod and it was low and it was portable and it was stable. So I didn't have to bring this huge mess of tripod and kind of stabilize everything down with, heavy, solid gear. I could just use my normal setup and then have it on that ground pod and then just get real nice, smooth, stable footage because, and I've still put out plenty of stuff myself that is admittedly like too shaky, but with these focal lengths, when, we're shooting this long and it's all of a sudden video, like any movement on this stuff translates into just shaking in the image. The one advent of recent stuff that's helped is going slow motion. Shooting higher frame rate video can kind of help smooth out that motion. So even if you're seeing it, it's not as like jarring anymore. It's just a little bit more smooth and that kind of thing. So that helps as well. And then the thing that I've realized, I just referenced it a minute ago, I spent 2.5 hours doing audio for a 15-minute video, is so much of the audio that I get while I'm shooting video is useless because unless it's dead calm, there's like tons of wind noise in the microphone. It's just, and it kills the audio, So I end up using like pretty much all the videos I put out recently. Maybe 2% of it, the video clips are actual audio I've recorded when I recorded that video. It's usually audio pulled from all over the place. And I'm recording other stuff from other different times and just putting it in where it seems like it fits. And again, time consuming, but for me lately, it's been fun. It's been fun to try and figure that out and kind of, it's like you're like piecing together the audio, what's going to sound like, and that's a huge part of the video thing. So it's something that I think as a still photographer, it never even crosses your mind because why would it? We don't ever have to deal with audio in an image. So just paying attention to that audio, I think is important as well. And listen, I'm very beginner at this, so I don't know a lot yet, but that would be my suggestion. Yeah. All right, guys. We went for a while there. Nice. Yeah, we're coming up on 2 hours. I'd say we wrap it up. Obviously, we can keep talking, but we'll do it again next month. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Our plan is to do this again next month. We don't have a date set yet. As soon as we have that date out, we will obviously let everybody know. And thank you, guys. It was great catching up with you all. Amazing images. You guys shared some incredible stuff, every single one of you. So look forward to doing this again next month. And that was fun.
Yeah, likewise, guys. Thanks for